Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we're going over the latest on the winter storm that is still ongoing in the Midwest, where it'll be heading next, and who might see snow tonight and tomorrow, along with the widespread freeze across the United States, which will impact areas as far south as the Florida Peninsula and as well as Texas. And not just that, but we're also going to be talking about that severe weather potential for next week across areas in the United States. Give you the latest breakdown and everything that you need to know in this forecast. Let's first begin with the watches and warnings though that we currently have ongoing, and beginning with the freeze warnings that extend as far west as areas like Colorado, but primarily are comprised across areas like Kansas, Oklahoma, goes all the way back through Pennsylvania. Make sure you're protecting your sensitive vegetation, as we are likely going to see temperatures drop below freezing in these areas. We also have freeze watches under another 11 states, from Virginia all the way back down through the Florida Panhandle. And yes, there are red flag warnings here, but there's also freeze watches in effect for areas in the western Florida Panhandle, due to the fact we'll probably see temperatures get near or just below freezing going into Wednesday and possibly Thursday morning there. Freeze watch is also in effect for southern Oklahoma. That might get extended into northern Texas here pretty soon. Also going to Louisiana. So again, make sure you're protecting your sensitive vegetation. On the other hand, we still have a winter storm ongoing. We still have winter storm warnings in effect for areas in the upper Michigan Peninsula. We also have winter weather advisories ongoing. Some of those include the lower Michigan Peninsula as well. And we also have winter weather advisory ongoing for areas back down into northern Indiana. And that's due to the fact that we have some heavy snow bands moving through northern Indiana right now. We'll get to that here in just a second. But first, talking about the widespread freeze, we're going to see temperatures drop below freezing across a large area of the United States. Any of these blue colors representing the potential for temperatures to drop below freezing, that goes as far south as the Florida Peninsula. Also, temperatures may drop into the teens across a pretty large area from Minnesota back through Missouri. It'll be pretty spotty, but most areas will be in the 20s, but you might see a couple of upper teens in those areas. Taking a closer look at Thursday morning for the southeast, we will see probably temperatures near freezing, if not just below freezing, especially in the Florida Peninsula, and as well as back into areas like Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. So again, make sure you're protecting your sensitive vegetation. All right, let's talk about the winter storm. What is expected here over the next several hours? Well, let's first talk about what's happening right now. So we still have some snow ongoing back up in the upper Michigan Peninsula. That will continue. It's lake effect snow. Should continue for the next few hours, most likely through the overnight as well. In the short term, though, we have a heavy area of rain and as well as snow currently in the northern areas of Indiana. This is beginning to accumulate, and we're also seeing very heavy snow in some areas right now. That will continue throughout the next several hours. May bring a couple of inches of snow. Can't rule out 1 to 3 inches. Isolated areas might see upwards of 4 to 5 inches. The HRR model does indicate we may see another couple of bands tomorrow morning, so if that ends up happening, may even see some higher accumulations than just 1 to 3 inches. But again, take it with a grain of salt. We might not see that, but it's a possibility. Going into tomorrow morning, we'll begin to see snow ramp back up in the upper Michigan Peninsula as well as northern Michigan, and those couple of areas will begin to see more snow. We may see some accumulations as well back up into the northern areas of Michigan. Eventually going to Tuesday afternoon, a lot of this will transition into rain, and the upper Michigan Peninsula will likely start to kind of diminish with its overall snow activity, unless you're in the far eastern part of that region. Also going to the northeast, we'll probably see mostly rain here for the next about 6 to 12 hours. Unless you're in northwestern Pennsylvania, we may see a couple of snow showers develop going into the overnight hours tonight into tomorrow morning. But eventually going to Tuesday afternoon, we'll probably mostly see rain until it starts to transition back into some snow showers heading into Wednesday morning across areas like central and western Pennsylvania. Back into West Virginia, may see a couple of little snowflakes out there, but nothing really in terms of accumulation is expected there. So what are we talking about for the remaining accumulation? Well, as of now, not a whole lot's expected beyond maybe about another 3 to 6 inches in the peak areas for tonight across areas like the upper Michigan Peninsula. On the other hand, areas will likely just see between a coating to a couple of inches across a large area there of the upper Michigan Peninsula. On the other hand, we have a really big, interesting story here. We very well may see upwards of 1 to 3 inches of snow, which is currently the forecast, but we may see some amounts higher than that, depending on what happens overnight tonight. But let's just go ahead and kind of take it with a grain of salt for right now. Let's just go ahead and say we're going to see about 1 to 3 inches with an isolated amount higher than that. But I can't rule out that it gets closer to maybe 4, 5, or 6 inches possibly near South Bend if we see that scenario happen tonight where we see a little bit of that lake effect snow. Heading back over into Ohio, current forecast is not much. So if you're in Ohio, you might might be lucky to see a few snowflakes or a coating, which some areas actually have seen some snowflakes today, but just not any accumulation. Northwestern Pennsylvania, same story there, just a little bit of snow, maybe an inch or two is possible there. On the other hand, the overall winter storm impacts from this, they're going to be fairly minimal for the next 24 to 48 hours. Not a whole lot is expected in northern Indiana, just minor impacts at this point. At least for tonight, they'll be a bit more moderate to major just due to how much snow we're seeing out there right now. But overall, current forecast, it's just minor. Back up into areas like the upper Michigan Peninsula, at least for now, we're probably going to remain with those major to extreme impacts in some areas across the upper Michigan Peninsula. So stay safe out there. Make sure you're taking the roadways slowly if you must. Before this forecast ends, I do want to talk about the long term and what to expect across the United States over the next few days. High pressure will return. We'll see heat as well return across a large portion of the United States going into the mid to late week as well as into the weekend. Eventually going into early next week, though, we'll have a low pressure system really start to strengthen. Where this starts to develop and where it goes is a big question mark. There is a large range of where it could go. It could go as far south as areas like Kansas. It could go as far north as Canada. Depending on the placement will also depend on severe weather possibilities and maybe even snow possibilities as well. And then eventually going to next week, we may begin to see some severe weather return. I'll talk about more on that once we get closer. Make sure to like button down below and subscribe if you're not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.